Hello everyone, this is page 14 of chapter 5 of KiLA iLO Northern Lights. I'm showing you the line art stage only. This is the sketch I start with. It's a 600 dpi scan, and you see I'm inking it in Clip Studio Paint, which is kind of geared towards comic artists. It was called Manga Studio back in the day. And this step here is me setting up the panel frames. I've set up a grid tool, and I'm using the rectangular select to make my panels. The grid is to make them neat and tidy so that every panel gutter is the same width. So this is kind of an idiosyncratic way to make your panel borders. I don't recommend doing this. Clip Studio Paint actually has its own suite of tools for doing panel borders that I have not found very useful. They seemed to just kind of slow down the process, but I'm sure anyone who is familiar with those tools and knows how to use them is screaming. So right now what I'm doing is arranging the artwork so that it is neatly within the panel borders that I set out. And on this panel, I thought the two figures were awkwardly placed, so I'm moving one of them over. This is all done on an XP Pen tablet. I have the 13.3 Pro, I believe. I've had it for a couple years now. And it's a tablet monitor where you draw on the screen. And in future maybe I'll record what the screen looks like. This is just a screen recording. And this recording is in real time. I edited out some pauses where nothing was going on, or I was doing something on another window that wasn't captured, such as changing the grid settings. But it's not sped up or anything. You see the lines appear at the same speed that I made them. And this page was a little bit different from my regular process because I usually ink the figures first and then the background behind them. But on this page, I have the same viewing angle of the background in the first panel and the last panel, so I'm copying it and using the same artwork of the scenery between the two panels. So I drew it first so I could copy it and paste it in and adjust the figures onto the pre-drawn background in that fourth panel so that they would be in the right place and match up the furniture, because there's furniture that they're interacting with on this page. If they were just standing in a field or something, I might just draw them floating in space and paste a background behind them, but I couldn't get away with that here. Usually I like to have 6 to 8 panels per page. This one has fewer because there are so many objects on the panel. And it looks like there's free space around the figures, but that space is for the lettering. So in order to have enough space for figures and acting and lettering, I've got two big panels here where I usually would have 2 or 3 on the row. And so this is freehand digital inking. I'm using a vector layer, and Clip Studio Paint is not really known for its vector tools. All that's happening with the vectors as opposed to a raster layer here is that the vector layer allows me to use the eraser tool and erase anything that's between two lines. You'll see this especially in a minute or two when I've drawn that table and I'm deleting everything that's behind it. Instead of manually going in and erasing everything or having to do a bunch of different layers so that I can erase without erasing anything I don't intend, the vector tool will delete the line right up to the intersection point and not beyond it. So that's very handy. But I'm not making use of any of the... Well, the other thing is resizing. If I've gotten something the wrong size and I need to adjust it, that can be done neatly with a vector. But other than that, I'm not making a whole lot of use of vector tools. Clip Studio Paint isn't really known for that. I don't even have stabilization on. You can see when the pen tool is selected, stabilization over there on the left-hand side is set to 0. And that's because it causes a slight laggy feeling when you draw freehand. Now I would have to investigate because there's always also settings in the driver for the tablet, and I might have some stabilization enabled there that I'm not aware of, and I'm just thinking, oh, I have such a steady hand. There's probably some stabilization going on somewhere, which means that I perceive that lag when Clip Studio Paint is also doing stabilization. That's why I had to turn it off. So you see the strategy for digital inking like this is I just quickly draw the line and I hit Control-Z if it doesn't go in the right spot and just keep redrawing it. And that's different from how I would ink on paper, where you can't redraw the line, so you just draw it slowly and carefully and try to get it right the first time. But now maybe this has changed because stabilization has really improved and the hardware has really improved, but at least back when I learned how to ink digitally, the line would just jitter if you tried to draw it too slowly. That's why you've got these... I'm kind of throwing a quick line and then just redoing it if it doesn't look good. So right now we're still in this little interrogation scene, and every other page or so someone takes another cookie. They're chocolate chip, and Agent Leach actually baked them herself. I don't remember if she mentioned that, but if she did, it wasn't a government lie. She baked them all on her own. And I don't think she planned on doing an interrogation when she did that, so she must just bring cookies to the office. And this is probably not a major surprise to anyone who spends a lot of time on YouTube, but this scene was referenced pretty heavily, both visually and dialogue-wise, from the good old channel JCS Criminal Psychology, and it's footage of interrogation scenes. And of course, the primary difference is they're talking to aliens and everything's completely made up and sort of comedic, but the setup of the room was based on what you see in those interrogation rooms where there's not much in there. Now, of course, when you're watching the footage of one of these, you don't see the camera that's recording it, so There's probably at least one visible camera inside this type of room, but I don't think they have this panopticon setup that I have here, where you've got 4 or 5 security cameras pointing directly at the subjects. Composition-wise, the cameras echo the guns that the agents were pointing at them in the beginning of the chapter when they initially got arrested. It cut right from the guns being pointed down at them in the crater to this room where there are cameras pointing down in a similar angle, and the cameras are also the same color. Yep, and that's done, so that's just a copy and paste, and then in the close-up in those middle 2 panels, there aren't any scenic elements behind them, so I'm just ignoring those for now. And because I had this plan of using the same background in both panels, I named my layers, which I don't usually do. You see they're both named BG. And to be honest, my pages are usually just a mess of layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. I think I usually only get up to 20 layers maximum. I know there are some artists who will have like 300 layers that are not named. And this is a common technique known as deciding something is done and then realizing it's not. I'm not bothering to alter the copy of the ink layer with that new line that I added because when I'm finished making the page, this background will have additional layers on it that will also need to be copied and pasted. Right now, the copy of just the inks is only there as a reference for inking the character artwork. It will be replaced with a set of layers that includes the completed background. See, this woman's bangs really want to melt into that door frame behind her. Now, her ear is making a pretty obvious tangent with the chair. The tangent, if that's not terminology you're familiar with, is when lines touch in a way that's not good for your composition. You see her ear is following the same line as the chair, and that gives an awkward visual impression that she is melting into her chair, but I'm going to be erasing that part of the line and it will be completely blocked later, so I left it in place. In fact, that entire line of the chair is going to be blocked by her body in the final version. If only part of that line was still visible, it might still look like it was following the curve of her ear, so I may have needed to fix it in that case. Now, there are some people who say you should never ever zoom in when you're inking, and I think the philosophy behind that is the people who are viewing the finished work are not going to zoom in on it, and you're kind of wasting your time. But I zoom in a little bit. My sketches are very small, and I'm using this kind of simplified style where a crooked line could be pretty visible. And my working surface isn't that big either. My tablet monitor that I'm using is about the size of a sheet of paper, of letter-sized paper if you're using US paper sizes. Now, I kind of regret not putting any funny pictures or anything on her coffee mug, but if I had, I would have had to keep it consistent throughout this entire scene. And we'll say it's a government mug and she's not allowed to put anything on it. Now, I had not actually decided when this scene started whether these would be government agents or if they're working for a private sort of galactic security company. But I'm still not entirely decided on that, to be honest. But it's funny to joke about them being from the government. So that might be what makes the decision on that one. This woman's not very tall. I think she's about... I haven't assigned her a specific height in feet or in inches, but it's probably around 5 feet. And, so... they've never been standing in the same place on level ground together, but she's probably not much taller than Ket here, the guy with the mane, if she's taller than him at all. His species runs between probably 3.5 feet at the shortest, and 5 to 5.5 at the tallest. And Ket is a member of the sort of subspecies that reaches the tallest height, and his buddy As is the shortest one. So that's why they end up with kind of that almost the villain henchman style body builds. And you see I've got more tangents here that I'm not fixing because they will be blocked when the flat color layer is added. And I keep zooming out like that and moving the panel around because I'm making sure that their eyes are looking in the right spot. They're supposed to be looking at Ket, who's speaking. Agent Leech here has been taking notes throughout this entire thing, and I'm not sure if her notes are valid or if she looks at them later at all, or if she's doing it as a bit of a flex because it freaks people out when they're talking and you start to write something. These two agents are doing something that's based on good cop, bad cop, and it's probably pretty obvious that that's what they've been doing, but I tried to, it's supposed to be a little bit more complex than that, where Leech sets herself up as, oh, I'm the friendly one, and I'm offering you cookies and all of this, and then she will suddenly do something that will set them on edge, like say, well, I know you want to leave the facility, but we can discuss that later. So it's, neither one of them are entirely safe. And both of them are also having way too much fun with this. And that tip of his ear that's just touching the line, that also can't stay like that in the final artwork, but his ears will be behind the chair, so that will not be in place. But that's not going to be changed until I start on the flats. I don't think this recording has any of those overlapping pieces erased. And if the page was set up differently, I might be inking the background and the foreground on the same layer, because there's not always a need to have them separated out if the background's fairly simple, and I can save time by doing that all in one step. But here they're on separate layers, and I didn't erase any of the overlaps. I just dealt with it in the flat color stage. By the time of recording this audio, the page is entirely finished. I recorded the inking on one day, and then I went in and finished the page and recorded the audio right before posting the early access page to Coffee. And this video is posted first along with the early access page, and then publicly it will be posted when the public version of the page is up. So that will be February. Well, we'll already be into February. January was not a great month for me, and it wasn't a great month for these guys either, so that's fun. And the plan is that by the end of this sequence, there should be no cookies left. I have to update my thumbnails. So the part of the... Oh, yeah, and here I've noticed that they're a little bit out of scale. The part of the page that you didn't see created was the sketch, which starts with a thumbnail that just hammers out the general layout of the panels and what's happening on the page. And next is a draft sketch. You see those blue lines underneath. So the draft sketch happens next, and then there's a refining sketch on top of it, which is the gray graphite lines. Her coffee's probably cold by now. And the reason why I don't film the sketch is because I don't have a document camera right now. But if you're interested in that, I can update my equipment or rig something up with my phone. Let me know. This page is not yet lettered. Sometimes I letter the pages before I ink them so that I know exactly how much space is needed for the inks, and I didn't this time, and I don't remember if there was a specific reason why not, but I knew that there was going to be plenty of space in the composition. And sometimes I work with a script, but it's a sort of vague script because I always end up revising quite a bit when I see what the finished page looks like. So they're going to discuss this a little bit in a couple of pages, but the reason why Agent Jenkins looked kind of aggrieved when Leach came in was because she wanted a turn to play the good cop, but she's not very good at that, and she knows she's not very good at it, so that was why she kind of looked down and accepted that the other person coming in meant she would not be playing good cop. And she's not being fully aggressive either. She could be like really going hard, making threats and all this, but all she's saying is, well, logically, here are the reasons why we can't let you leave, and all of that. So it's sort of like they know these are small fish, and they're kind of toying with them a little bit. Now, even their outfits were supposed to be that Leach and Jenkins are both wearing sort of standard issue, like the men in black suits, but Leach has a slightly softer version where she is wearing a skirt and she has curved lapels, and that's the amount of individuality you're allowed to have in the government, I guess. And here she's doing the thing where she's either writing on the clipboard or perhaps pretending to write on the clipboard, because we saw on other pages that this clipboard has printed material on it, and she really might not be writing on it at all. That might just be a prop. It's really easy to get into the habit of just drawing people's faces because it's easier. So here I was trying not to cop out, and each of these two have props that they're interacting with. And here I zoomed out a little bit, and I'm making sure that her coffee mug looks like it's a consistent volume between the panels, and her hand is the same size and about the same place on the mug. I'm not a perfect artist by any means, but those little details go a long way to make the page not be just jarring. No one's going to have perfect art all the time, but you don't want a mistake to be so obvious that people come out of the story to point and laugh at it. Now the weights on the inking. So I'm using an inking style that is supposed to evoke animation, like TV animation. That's why the color palettes are simple, and I'm using the hard-edged cell shading, and I don't want the inks to be super heavy. That's why I wouldn't ink this on paper by hand or anything like that. I want it to be very clean. So I don't want to get crazy with line weights because animation doesn't do a lot with line weights, but it is a bit thicker where the lines meet. It's a little bit thicker where there would be shadows or towards the bottom of the image. I'm balancing the desire for that animation style look with I don't want my lines to be so uniform that they are unpleasant to behold. Because everyone knows this isn't really animation, I wouldn't want to go and commit to that look so strongly that it's no longer an appealing looking comic, because it's a comic. But overall, I try to use designs that would function in animation. I can, of course, stretch that a little bit. I think the disheveled areas of Ket's mane, for example, his sideburns by his face, are a little bit too uneven. I would probably expect to change that if he were being used as an animated character and make them a consistent shape and volume, because right now I just kind of scribbled them in, which is great for making them really disheveled looking in a medium that can convey that. But if I wanted them to move, I would have to have consistent shapes. I mean, okay, I wouldn't have to have... You can get away with a lot in art, but I would want to have consistent shapes that can be maintained across frames. Because variation across panels is one thing, variation across frames would start to jitter and all of that. So I am being intentionally vague about how many years this is after the first comic, because I want the world of the story to be not our world. It looks like our world. It can be assumed to act like our world if there's no reason given why it's different. But it isn't one-to-one. I don't want to anchor it to specific dates, because once you give a date, you evoke things that happened in the real world at that time, and even giving a defined length of time implies a date. So I just don't want to get into that. Now, the old comic probably has some year given where it takes place. I don't think I was as conscious of that kind of thing back then. But if it does, no it doesn't. And we're going to pretend that didn't happen. But what I'm getting at is these two are roughly, I'm not giving a specific date, they are roughly 10 to 20 years older than the last time we saw them. Perhaps. This character was a 12-year-old girl, and now she is a grown woman. And her aunt had all black hair, and now she has gone completely gray. And the intention is that Jenkins here could be any age from 21 to 35, and her aunt could be a 40-year-old woman who's gone prematurely gray and has a few aging marks, like a neck wrinkle, because she works for the government and it's stressful. Or she could be 70 years old and aging well. She did not have an age given for her in the original comic, so I just wanted her to look older than she was, which is fairly easy to pull off with the child is now an adult, but her aunt had to become a silver fox. Both of these characters visually are based off of family members to some extent, but Leech is much older than her visual reference, so if I show that person the art, I'll have to say, and by the way, she's supposed to be like 10 years older than you are. At some point in her history, Jenkins was almost a kind of self-portrait, but I don't think the eventual design in the original work looked much like me in the end, and this older version certainly doesn't, because there was even more of a divergence when I aged up that design into an adult. But we still have the same eye color. I think that's pretty much it. Similar hair and complexion, but don't think quite that either. But then again, we're always bad at judging how we look, so maybe if you saw a picture of me, you'd go, oh yeah, it's a self-portrait. People always, well, not always, people often ask, which of your characters is most like yourself, and visual design notwithstanding, I would hope the answer is none of them. Anytime you write, you're finding areas of commonality, but none of them are meant to be like that similar. And most of them are sort of set up to be incompetent people who cause problems, so I hope there's not that much of a similarity. But I do love cookies. I really enjoy drawing hands. Hands don't always seem to feel the same way about me. See, that index finger was layered pretty badly before I changed the line width on it. When I'm inking on paper, I like to use a brush pen, one of the Tombow brush pens, usually the ones that are filled with an ink reservoir that you don't actually use real ink bottles with. And I like using really heavy inks. And that style is not what I wanted for this. But using that style did teach me a lot of things to apply to this sort of cleaner, finer, less dramatic inking. So any time you experiment with tools or styles, you take things away that you apply to what you were doing outside of that, and no time is ever wasted in art, even when it really feels like it. Sometimes I'll work on an exercise and I'll think I learned nothing, but then I go back to what I was doing before and it feels different and it turns out different, and I'm just looking from the top panel to the last panel to make sure the figures are the same size-ish. I have to scroll up and down like that because, as I told you, my tablet monitor is fairly small. So, this interrogation scene here will be wrapping up in a few pages, I think, and I'll be happy to move on to a different environment to draw. The characters need to stay in a location as long as the story needs them to be there, but sometimes that length of time does not match the length of time it takes me to get tired of drawing an environment, so it's nice when people leave. I didn't really need to render the tuft on his ear because it will be hidden by the back of the chair, but I have it. It's, all along, I've been drawing pieces of the characters that are going to be hidden, and that's because it makes sure that the lines that are visible are going the right way. See, the ears here, if I had just stopped at the edge of the chair, the ears might not have been in the right shape or the right volume because I wasn't carrying through that line. I'm used to judging how that ear should look by looking at the whole shape of it. So that's why I'm drawing stuff that I'm just going to erase later. Erase or cover. Oh, and I'm so used to seeing it flip back and forth I haven't explained. When you flip something while you're inking it, you see the mistakes in it. So I keep flipping it back and forth to make sure that I'm not missing anything, because you start to see what you think should be there and not what is there, and you have to kind of mix things up. So that's it. That's this page. So thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you enjoyed this overview, and I hope you enjoyed the page. See you in the internet.